You're about to witness the true account of James Anderson, the skilled outdoorsman who went into Michigan's remote forests seeking peace and found something that changed him forever. You'll hear about the smell, that putrid chemical stench that signals something is wrong. You'll follow James as the sounds of something massive close in around him. You'll feel his terror when he finally sees the creature. Not a bear, not anything natural. Something impossibly tall, impossibly wrong. You'll experience the moment he fires his revolver twice and watches the bullets have absolutely no effect. You'll run with him through the forest as this thing hunts him with movements that defy nature itself. You'll suffer through his crawl through the darkness with shattered legs, dragging himself toward safety, toward hope. And you'll discover the most chilling truth of all, why it left him alive. This is a story about a man who lost his sanctuary, about the wilderness revealing something we were never meant to see, about a creature that exists in the gap between the known and the impossible. So hit that subscribe button, like this video, leave a comment telling me what you think awaits in those Michigan forests. Then sit back, turn off the lights, and prepare yourself for what comes next. My father taught me to hunt when I was 12 years old. The woods outside Traverse City became my classroom, and Dad, my silent instructor. He wasn't much for talking, my father, but in the stillness of a Michigan dawn, waiting for deer to emerge from morning mist, he taught me everything important without saying much at all. Patience, observation, respect for the wilderness and what lived in it. By 16, I could track deer through mixed hardwood forest. I'd field dress a buck with practiced efficiency and move through bushes making less noise than the squirrels overhead. While other kids played video games or hung out at the mall, I was studying animal prints in creek mud or practicing my marksmanship at the county range. The other boys thought I was strange. I didn't care. Nothing compared to that feeling of being alone in the forest, completely self-reliant, connected to something old and real. College took me to the University of Michigan, where I studied mechanical engineering because it seemed practical. My weekends belonged to whatever patches of nature I could find within driving distance. Those 4 years felt like marking time, a necessary step toward independence. But the classroom never compared to what my father had taught me with his calloused hands and knowing silences. After graduation, I took a position at Midwest Engineering Associates in Lansing, Michigan. The job promised advancement and good pay, but what really sold me was the proximity to the Upper Peninsula wilderness. I could build a career and still have forests at my doorstep. That was 8 years ago. The engineering work suited me. I had an eye for detail and a talent for spotting potential problems in designs before they became expensive mistakes. My colleagues respected my thoroughness, and clients appreciated my directness. I climbed steadily through the ranks, eventually heading the commercial development division. With success came longer hours, constant client calls and deadlines that kept me at the office until midnight more often than I wanted to admit. I met Elena through work. She came in as an interior designer on a hotel renovation project, and I noticed her immediately. Not just her striking amber eyes or the confident way she presented her concepts, but how meticulously she approached every aspect of her designs. We were married within 18 months, buying a house in a quiet Lansing suburb with good schools nearby, though we hadn't discussed children yet. Elena didn't share my passion for the outdoors. She'd grown up in Detroit, where nature was something you visited in carefully maintained parks, not something you immersed yourself in. Early in our relationship, she tried joining me on a few hikes, but her discomfort was obvious from the constant checking for ticks to her tight smile that never quite reached her eyes. "I just don't get what you see out there," she told me after a particularly mosquito-filled excursion. "We have this beautiful home with all the comforts anyone could want. Why spend your weekend getting dirty and exhausted?" I tried explaining at once that feeling of connection, of being part of something bigger than myself, but the words came out clumsy and inadequate. So we reached an unspoken agreement. My outdoor trips became solo adventures, while our shared time centered around home improvements, dinner with friends, and occasional city weekends. It worked for us mostly, but something essential in me started to wither without regular time in the woods, so I made it a priority. One weekend each month, sometimes two during winter when work slowed, I'd take a day trip to hike, fish, or simply sit in silence among trees. Elena never complained, though I sometimes caught a flicker of concern when I checked my revolver before leaving. "You really think you need that?" she asked the first time she saw me pack it. "Probably not," I admitted, sliding the .38 into its holster. "But spend enough time in remote areas, you learn to prepare for anything." The last week of November had been brutal at work. We'd lost a major contract due to a miscalculation in the bid. Not my department's error, but I'd spent days in damage control meetings. The office politics turned toxic, with departments pointing fingers and executives demanding explanations. By Friday evening, I felt hollowed out, my thoughts scattered and jumpy. I needed trees and silence more than I had in months. That night, after a quiet dinner with Elena, I retreated to my home office and started browsing hiking forums. The usual trails near Lansing wouldn't cut it. I needed something new, somewhere I could truly lose myself for a few hours. On a site dedicated to Upper Peninsula hiking, I found a thread about a secluded section of the North Country Trail in Ottawa National Forest, about 2 hours northeast of Lansing. "Hardly ever see another soul out there, especially this time of year," one user wrote. 7-mile loop with some nice views from the ridgelines. Not technically challenging, but remote enough to feel like you've left civilization behind. I studied the trail photos, noting the white diamond blazes marking the path through dense oak and hickory forest. The terrain looked perfect, challenging enough to demand attention, but not so difficult that I'd spend the entire hike watching my footing. Several commenters mentioned wildlife sightings: deer, wild turkey, even the occasional black bear, though those were rare in Michigan. I mapped the drive, just over 2 hours from our house to the trailhead. If I left early enough, I could be on the trail by sunrise, complete the loop by early afternoon, and be home for dinner. Elena had plans to meet friends for lunch anyway, perfect timing. That night, I packed with my usual precision, laying everything out on the bed in our spare room. My day pack contained 3 liters of water, protein bars, beef jerky, a small first aid kit, a compass, and a physical map of the trail area in addition to the GPS on my phone. I added a headlamp, extra batteries, and a lightweight emergency blanket, another habit from Dad, who insisted on preparing for unexpected overnight stays even on day hikes. My hunting knife went into its leather sheath on my belt. Last came my .38 Smith & Wesson revolver. I checked it carefully, loaded 5 rounds, and secured it in my hip holster. Michigan's concealed carry laws made this legal, and in remote areas the gun provided peace of mind against both 4-legged and 2-legged threats. I laid out my clothes: moisture-wicking base layer, flannel shirt, insulated vest, and waterproof jacket, thick hiking socks, and broken-in boots completed the outfit. The weather forecast predicted temperatures in the low 40s, cold enough to keep casual hikers away, perfect for someone seeking solitude. Elena came in while I was packing and leaned against the doorframe, watching me with a small smile. "Got everything you need to survive the apocalypse?" she asked. "Just the essentials," I replied, returning her smile. "I'm not going far. Just a new trail I found online. Should be back for dinner." She nodded, then crossed the room and kissed me lightly. "Be careful out there, okay?" she said. "Cell reception can be spotty in those hills. Always am." I promised. "I'll text when I'm headed back." That night I slept poorly, partly from anticipation and partly from lingering stress from work. By 4:30 a.m., I gave up trying, quietly showered and dressed in the dark. Downstairs, I made a thermos of coffee and grabbed a banana for the drive. Before leaving, I paused in our bedroom doorway, watching Elena sleep. The soft rhythm of her breathing, the way her dark hair spread across the pillow, these moments always stirred something protective in me. I moved to her side and gently kissed her forehead. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. "I love you," I whispered, though I knew she couldn't hear me. The cold hit me hard when I stepped outside, making my lungs sting. I loaded my gear into my Ford F-150 and started the engine, letting it warm up while I scraped frost off the windshield. The neighborhood was quiet, with just a few porch lights on. As I backed out of the driveway, I felt better already. I always do when I head out alone. The roads were empty as I drove through Lansing and got onto Highway 2 going northeast. My headlights lit up the road ahead, and I sipped coffee while listening to classic rock playing softly. After 2 hours of driving through more and more country roads, I reached the turnoff for the Forest Access Road. I followed it for 3 miles, my truck handling the bumpy dirt path, no problem. The sky was getting lighter, turning from black to dark blue, but the trees were still pretty dark. The trailhead parking area was basically just a wide spot in the road with room for maybe 6 vehicles. Mine was the only one there, exactly what I wanted. I turned off the engine and sat for a minute, listening to the engine cooling down and the first bird starting to chirp. I checked my watch. 6:45 a.m. Perfect time to start hiking as daylight filled the forest. I put on my day pack, adjusted my belt so I could easily reach both my knife and revolver, and locked the truck. The air smelled like pine and damp dirt, fresh and crisp at the trailhead. An old wooden sign showed a simple map of the loop and some rules. I took a picture of it with my phone as backup to my paper map. The white diamond trail markers stood out on the tree trunks. With one last look at my truck, I stepped onto the trail and into the trees, not knowing that this normal morning hike would change everything. All the stuff before today would soon feel like someone else's life. Back then, I thought I knew what the wilderness was all about. I stepped from my truck into the morning chill, breathing in the clean Upper Peninsula air. The temperature couldn't have been more than 35 degrees, but that suited me fine. The frosty leaves crunched under my boots as I got my gear ready, adjusted my day pack, and locked the vehicle. The forest was pretty quiet. Sunlight had just started coming through the trees, making bright spots on the ground. I checked my watch. 6:52 a.m. Perfect timing. The trailhead was about 20 feet ahead, marked by a simple wooden sign with a carved map of the 7-mile loop. I took a moment to relax, feeling the stress start to fade away. All the work stuff, spreadsheets, client calls, office drama, didn't matter out here. This was why I came, to feel like myself again, instead of some guy in work clothes sitting through meetings. The white diamond trail markers were easy to spot in the early light against the dark tree bark. I followed them into the forest, my footsteps, the only sound besides a few birds chirping. Hiking in November meant empty trails, no crowds with their speakers blasting music, no big family groups, just me in the woods. That made me smile. "This is exactly what I needed," I said to no one, my voice seeming small under the vast dome of trees. The trail went through patches of oak and hickory trees. Most of their leaves had already fallen, letting me see bits of sky that would be hidden in summer. I kept a steady pace, not too fast or slow. My breathing matched my steps as I walked. About a mile in, the path went uphill toward a ridge. It wasn't super steep, but enough to make me warm up and unzip my jacket halfway. At the top I could see through the trees to the view hills stretching out all brown and deep red from fall. I stopped for a minute to look. 2 hawks flew circles overhead, barely flapping their wings. I watched until they disappeared behind a far-off hill. Back on the trail, I looked down at the ground, checking out the tracks in the mud and leaves. Fresh deer prints crossed the path, looked like a mom and baby based on their size. Turkeys had scratched around in spots where they'd been looking for acorns. I noticed all this stuff without really thinking about it. My dad taught me that animal signs aren't just interesting, they actually tell you how a forest works. You learn where animals find water, food, and which places might have predators. The trail went down into a small valley with a creek running through it. The water flowed over smooth rocks, making a nice sound. I checked my watch. I'd been hiking for just over an hour. Good time for a break. I took off my pack and sat on a fallen log by the creek. I opened my water bottle, took a few long drinks, then filled it up from my reservoir. The hike and cold air had made me thirstier than I thought. That's when it hit me. A smell so bad it made me pull back. It was disgusting, like sewage and rot mixed with something else I couldn't place. It wasn't just the normal smell of a dead animal or natural decay. This was too strong, almost fake smelling. I covered my nose with my sleeve. What the hell? I stood up and looked around. I figured it might be a dead deer, maybe one that got shot by a hunter and came here to die, but the smell didn't seem right for that. It was too strong and weird. I grabbed my pack and started checking the area, walking in circles around the creek. The dry leaves made it easy to spot any big animal remains, but I didn't find anything. No dead animal, no dug-up ground that might show something buried, nothing to explain the awful smell. After about 10 minutes of looking, I gave up and went back to the trail. Whatever it was, I couldn't see it, and the smell was making my eyes water. Maybe some kind of chemical runoff, I thought. Though my map showed we were at least 5 miles from any road or building, as I kept hiking, the smell got weaker and was gone after another quarter mile. I took deep breaths of fresh air, happy it was gone. The weird smell left me feeling a bit off, but I figured it was just one of those strange things in the woods. Probably has an explanation, just not one I could figure out right then. The next part of trail went through thicker forest before opening up at the bottom of a limestone cliff. The light-colored rock wall was about 30 feet high, with layers that reminded me of a cake, and small trees and bushes growing from cracks. Water had worn cool patterns into the stone ripples, small caves and honeycomb shapes that looked good in the late morning light. I stopped to pull out my phone and take some pictures of the rocks. The lighting was perfect, with the sun high enough to show the cliff's details without washing them out. Elena would like these. She always noticed cool patterns in nature and used them in her design work. After taking a few shots, I checked my GPS app. I'd gone about 3 miles, putting me halfway through the trail. I was on good time to finish the loop and get back to my truck by early afternoon. As I put my phone back in my pocket, I heard something. A snap, and then rustling from deeper in the forest, maybe 50 yards off the trail. I stopped and listened carefully. I heard it again. Something moving through bushes heavy enough to break fallen branches. Probably a deer, I thought. Or maybe a wild turkey. There were black bears in these woods, too, though they were rare in this part of Michigan and usually stayed away from people. I stood still for another minute, but when I didn't hear anything else, I shrugged and kept going. Seeing wildlife was part of hiking anyway. Besides, whatever it was seemed to be moving away from the trail, not toward me. The path got narrower past the cliff, winding between trees that grew closer together. The extra shade made it cold again, so I zipped my jacket back up. Looking ahead, I could see the trail going down into a small valley before climbing up the other side. Tougher walking than what I'd done so far. I fixed my pack straps and kept going. I noticed how alone I was out here. I hadn't seen another person since leaving the parking lot, and the forest felt like it was all around me. This was exactly the alone time I'd wanted, away from office lights and endless emails. With that thought, I headed down into the valley, not knowing that my peaceful hike was about to get really messed up. The descent into the ravine required careful footing. I picked my way down the steep path, using tree trunks for balance where the trail narrowed between exposed roots and loose stones. The exertion warmed me despite the November chill. At the bottom, a small seasonal creek had carved a path through the forest floor, now reduced to occasional pools of stagnant water. I paused to take a drink from my water bottle and check my map. The climb out of the ravine would lead to the trail's halfway point according to the topographical lines. I folded the map and tucked it into my jacket pocket, then began the ascent. The incline was more challenging than the descent. My breathing grew heavy as I climbed, and I found myself stopping twice to rest. The forest seemed different on this side of the ravine. The trees grew closer together, creating deep pockets of shadow even in late morning. No matter. I'd hiked through denser woods than this. 20 minutes of steady climbing brought me to the ridgeline. A weathered wooden sign stood at a small clearing, its surface gray and cracked from years of exposure. The carved letters had once been painted white, but now appeared as shallow grooves in the wood. Trail midpoint, 3.5 miles. I'd made good time. According to my watch, I'd been hiking for just under 2 hours. I shrugged off my pack and set it against the signpost, rolling my shoulders to release the tension. The view from this vantage point was less impressive than the earlier vista, just more trees stretching into the distance, their bare branches creating a complex lattice against the sky. That's when it hit me again. The putrid smell from earlier, but magnified. It rolled over me like a physical wave, so intense I nearly gagged. I pulled my jacket collar up over my nose, but the fabric offered little protection against the stench. It reminded me of roadkill left too long in summer heat, mixed with something chemical and wrong. "Jesus!" I muttered into my collar, eyes watering. I turned in a slow circle, searching for the source. Nothing visible explained the overwhelming odor. No dead animal, no stagnant pond, nothing that might account for such a powerful stench. The smell seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. As I stood there trying not to breathe too deeply, I noticed something else. The forest had gone completely silent. No bird calls, no rustling of squirrels and dry leaves, not even the buzz of late-season insects. The absence hit me harder than the smell. A vacuum of sound where there should have been dozens of small noises. I knew these woods. Not this specific trail, but forests like it. They were never completely quiet, not even in winter. Something had silenced the normal inhabitants. My hand moved to the revolver on my hip, fingers brushing the grip without drawing it. I felt exposed, standing in the clearing. Years of hunting had taught me to trust. That prickle at the back of my neck, the one telling me eyes were watching. I listened, focusing past my own breathing. For several long seconds, nothing. Then, a crack of branches behind me, maybe 30 yards back down the trail I'd just climbed. Too loud for a squirrel or raccoon, too heavy. Another crack, then the distinctive sound of something large moving through brush. My mind catalogued possibilities. Black bear, most likely, though they rarely approached humans. Maybe a feral hog. They'd become more common in the Upper Peninsula over the past decade. Either could be dangerous if startled or if I stood between them and a food source or young. I drew the revolver, the weight familiar in my hand. "Hey!" I called out, my voice unnaturally loud in the silent forest. "Make some noise out there." Hikers and hunters often called out to warn wildlife of their presence. Most animals would avoid humans if given the chance to retreat. No response came except more movement. Now moving to my left, circling toward where the trail continued. The smell grew stronger, making my eyes water and my throat constrict. This wasn't right. Bears had a distinct odor, musky and wild, but nothing like this concentrated rot. And bears didn't typically circle humans. They either approached directly or retreated. I backed away from the sign, keeping my eyes on the tree line where I'd heard the movement. The revolver remained steady in my hand, pointed at the ground, but ready to raise if needed. "I'm armed," I called out, considering the remote possibility this was a person. "Identify yourself." Nothing but more movement. Heavier now, branches snapping with deliberate force. Whatever was out there, it wanted me to know it was there. My mouth went dry. I grabbed my pack and slung it over one shoulder, unwilling to take my right hand off the revolver to properly adjust both straps. The smell had become nearly unbearable, making it difficult to think clearly. I began walking again, faster now, following the trail away from the sign. Every few steps I glanced back over my shoulder, expecting to see something emerge from the trees. Nothing appeared, but the sounds continued, keeping pace with me just out of sight. The path narrowed again as it wound through a section of younger trees. I moved quickly, but carefully, not wanting to trip or make enough noise to mask the sounds of my pursuer. My boot caught on an exposed root, and I stumbled forward, catching myself before falling. In that brief moment of imbalance, the sounds behind me accelerated, as if whatever was following had sensed vulnerability and surged forward. I spun around, revolver raised, aiming at nothing. The trail behind me was empty, the trees still, but the smell. God, the smell was stronger than ever, thick enough to taste. My training took over. I turned and continued forward at a steady jog, no longer concerned about making noise. The .38 remained in my hand, my thumb resting on the hammer. 5 rounds. I reminded myself. 5 chances if this went bad. The trail curved ahead, following the natural contour of the ridge. As I rounded the bend, I saw what I'd been hoping for, a fork in the path marked by another wooden sign. I approached it at a jog, reading the directions quickly. Loop continuation, 3.5 miles. Return to trailhead, 3.5 miles. I'd planned to complete the full loop, but that no longer seemed smart. Something was following me, something that didn't act like any animal I knew. The direct route back to the parking area was safer. I only paused for a second before taking the left fork heading back toward my truck. As I made my decision, the movement behind me completely stopped. The sudden quiet freaked me out more than being followed. I stopped and listened carefully, still holding my revolver ready. 10 seconds passed. 20. Nothing. Had it given up? No, that didn't feel right. The smell was still there, hanging in the air like garbage. I kept going down the left fork, keeping my pace, listening for any sound behind me. After about 50 yards, I heard it, not just movement now, but crashing. Whatever had been stalking me wasn't trying to hide anymore. The sounds came faster, branches breaking, leaves crunching under something heavy. That's when it hit me. I wasn't being followed. I was being hunted. When I realized this, my body flooded with adrenaline. I started running, not caring about staying quiet anymore. Behind me, the crashing got louder, faster, keeping up with me. I didn't look back. Couldn't risk it. But I just knew the distance between us was getting smaller. I broke into a run, abandoning any pretense of stealth. The sounds behind me accelerated, branches snapping, leaves crunching under heavy weight. Whatever pursued me was no longer trying to remain hidden. The path curved ahead, winding between thick tree trunks. My boots pounded against the dirt, kicking up small clouds of dust and dead leaves. I clutched the revolver tightly, my finger resting just outside the trigger guard as I ran. The smell, that putrid, impossible smell, grew stronger with each passing second. Every few yards, I glanced back over my shoulder, expecting to see my pursuer breaking through the tree line. Nothing appeared, yet the crashing sounds continued, sometimes from directly behind me, sometimes from off to my left or right, as if the thing was cutting through the forest rather than following the trail. I rounded another bend and spotted a deadfall ahead. A massive oak had collapsed across the path, its trunk as thick as a car. Without breaking stride, I vaulted over it, using my free hand for balance. My landing kicked up more leaves as I immediately pushed forward, hoping the obstacle might slow whatever followed. The crashing sounds paused briefly. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope. Then the noises resumed, louder and faster than before. "Come on," I muttered through gritted teeth, forcing my legs to pump harder. The trail narrowed as it wound around a limestone outcropping. I slowed just enough to navigate the tighter path without losing my footing on loose rock. As I rounded the bend, I stopped dead in my tracks. 30 yards ahead, a tall, dark figure stood partially hidden behind a massive oak tree. I froze, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. The figure wasn't a hiker or hunter, it was too tall, too still. It stood motionless, half concealed by the tree trunk watching me. Behind me, the crashing sounds had stopped completely. The forest fell silent except for my ragged breathing. I raised the revolver, years of practice at the shooting range taking over. Despite my racing thoughts, my hand remained steady. The sights aligned perfectly with where the figure's center would be if it stepped out from behind the tree. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice sounding thin in the silence. "Identify yourself." No response came. The figure remained motionless except for what looked like a slight tilt of its head. "I'm armed," I shouted louder this time. "Step out where I can see you." For a few long seconds, nothing happened. Then, really slowly, the figure started to move from behind the tree. When it came into full view, my brain couldn't accept what my eyes were seeing. This wasn't human. No way it could be human. The thing was almost 8 feet tall, with arms and legs that were way too long and skinny for its body. Its skin looked pale and tight, like it was shrink-wrapped to the bone. It had nothing on. No clothes, no equipment, nothing that would make me think it was just someone in a costume or doing some weird forest hike. Its face, oh God, its face had deep-set eyes that seemed to suck in light instead of giving any back. Under them was a mouth that was way wider than any normal mouth should be, with rows of teeth that reminded me of a shark. "What the fuck?" I whispered, the words barely audible even to myself. The creature cocked its head way too far to the side, almost a right angle. It reminded me of a dog, but there was nothing cute about how it was looking at me. It was sizing me up like I was its next meal. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice cracking. "I will shoot." The creature straightened its head and took one step forward. It moved smoothly, but in a weird way, like a spider video playing backwards. My training took over. I aligned the sights with the center of its chest, exhaled halfway, and squeezed the trigger twice in rapid succession. The shots broke the silence, bouncing off the limestone rocks nearby. The kickback pushed against my wrists, and that normal feeling brought me back to reality for a second. Both rounds hit their target. I was certain of it. At that range, with a stationary target, there was no possibility of a miss. The impacts should have knocked any living thing to the ground, regardless of size. The creature didn't flinch, it didn't stumble backward or clutch at wounds. It just stood there, staring at me with its hollow eyes like the bullets went right through it. "No," I said, disbelief, overwhelming fear for a split second. "That's not possible." Then it stood up tall, almost touching the bottom branches of the oak tree. It took a deep breath, and its mouth, which looked all wrong, opened way too wide. What came out of its throat was like nothing I'd ever heard before. Not a normal animal noise at all, but this weird, high-pitched screech that felt like it was stabbing into my head. The sound had these crazy tones that didn't belong together and made my teeth hurt and my eyes go blurry. I covered my ears with my hands and almost dropped my gun. It hurt bad, like someone was jamming something into my ears. When it finally shut up, I put my hands down, but my ears were still ringing. The creature had changed how it was standing. Now it was kind of crouched down, with its super long arms hanging down, fingers almost touching the ground. I could tell right away it was about to charge at me. I didn't even think. I just turned and ran. I heard it coming after me, not crashing through the bushes like before, but moving fast, with too many steps for something on 2 legs. I looked back once and immediately wished I hadn't. The thing wasn't running like normal. It had dropped down on all 4s, but not like a regular animal. Its legs and arms were bending in ways they shouldn't, twisting backwards and sideways as it moved like some giant bug. It was catching up way too fast. Closing the gap between us with each weird, stretched-out step, I ran harder than I ever had, with tree branches hitting my face as I went. My lungs were burning, and the gun suddenly felt heavy and useless in my hand. I forced my legs to pump harder, pushing my body beyond what I thought possible. The revolver felt useless in my hand, but I refused to drop it. Maybe if I got closer, maybe then the bullets would have an effect. The thought was irrational, but terror doesn't follow logic. The creature gained ground with each second. Its movement defied natural physics. All wrong angles and too quick bursts of speed. Those elongated limbs bent and twisted in ways that made my brain hurt just trying to process what I was seeing. Without slowing, I twisted my upper body and fired another shot behind me, not bothering to aim. The report echoed through the trees, but I didn't wait to see if I'd hit anything. The previous direct hits had done nothing. A wild shot was just desperation. My lungs burned with each breath. Sweat poured down my face despite the November chill, stinging my eyes and blurring my vision. I wiped it away with my sleeve without breaking stride. Ahead, the trail narrowed dramatically where it crossed a dry creek bed carved into the hillside. The path descended steeply, then climbed up the opposite bank at an equally sharp angle. Under normal circumstances, I would have slowed, picked my way down carefully. These weren't normal circumstances. I half ran, half slid down the embankment, loose dirt and pebbles rolling beneath my boots. The creek bed itself was mostly dry, just a few stagnant puddles remaining from the last rainfall. I splashed through one, my boots finding purchase on the rocky surface. The climb up the opposite bank stood right in front of me. Steeper than it had appeared from above, the trail switched back up between exposed roots and limestone outcroppings. I grabbed at roots and rocks, pulling myself upward, the revolver still clutched in my right hand. Behind me, the sounds changed. The rapid footfalls paused at the creek bed, then resumed with a different rhythm, faster, more determined. It knew I was slowing. "Come on, come on," I muttered to myself, scrambling faster. 3/4 of the way up the bank, my right boot came down on loose gravel. The rock shifted beneath my weight and my ankle rolled sideways. In that split second of imbalance, every advantage I'd fought for vanished. I felt it before I saw it, something impossibly sharp cutting across the backs of both legs just above the knee, not claws. This was different. It felt like being struck with a blade of ice or stone, slicing clean through fabric, skin, and deeper. Pain exploded through my lower body. My legs buckled instantly, no longer able to support my weight. I fell forward, arms outstretched, the revolver flying from my grasp. My head struck something hard, a rock protruding from the trail. Bright light burst behind my eyes, followed by tunneling darkness closing in from all sides. The last thing I registered was the overwhelming stench of rot and chemicals. Then nothing, cold. That was my first sensation, bone-deep cold that had settled into my body. I opened my eyes to a darkening sky visible through bare branches overhead. For several seconds I couldn't remember where I was or what had happened, and then it all rushed back. The creature, the chase, the attack. I tried to sit up and screamed as white-hot pain tore through both legs. Looking down, I saw my pants soaked with blood from mid-thigh downward. Both legs lay at wrong angles, clearly broken. Not just broken, shattered. The forest had fallen completely silent. No birds, no insects, no rustling leaves, and no sign of the creature. It had vanished, though its putrid smell lingered in the air, weaker now, but unmistakable. I fumbled for my pack, which had somehow remained on my back during the fall. My fingers felt thick and clumsy, and my vision swam with each movement. Concussion, I thought dimly. Add that to the list. I checked my watch, 2:37 p.m. I'd been unconscious for over an hour. The November sun already hung low in the sky, beginning its early winter descent. In less than 3 hours, I'd be in complete darkness. My phone showed no service, not surprising given the remote location. I was at least 2 miles from the parking area, maybe more if I'd gotten turned around during the chase. The reality of my situation crashed down on me. 2 broken legs, a head injury, no cell service, temperatures that would drop into the 30s after sunset, and somewhere out there, a creature that had hunted me for sport. I found my revolver in the dirt about 2 feet away. I grabbed it, checked the cylinder, 2 rounds left. I tucked it into my waistband, knowing it offered little protection, but unwilling to leave it behind. Survival mode engaged. I needed to make it back to the truck. Every wilderness first aid course taught the same thing. If you can't walk out, and no one knows to look for you, crawling becomes your only option. I took stock of what I had: my pack with water, some protein bars, a space blanket, a flashlight, matches, and basic first aid supplies. Nothing that could help with injuries this severe. Rolling onto my stomach sent new waves of pain crashing through my legs. I bit down on my sleeve to keep from screaming again. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. I'd bitten through my lip without realizing it. 1 yard at a time. That's all I could manage. I dug my elbows into the dirt and pulled, dragging my useless legs behind me. Each inch forward brought fresh agony, but I forced myself to continue. The trail back to the parking area was marked with white diamond blazes on trees. I focused on reaching the next marker, then the next, breaking the impossible distance into manageable goals. The sun continued its descent as I dragged myself along the forest floor. My world narrowed to the pain, the effort of movement, and the distance between trail markers. Nothing else mattered. Not the creature, not the wilderness I once loved, not even Elena waiting for me at home. Just the next white diamond, and the next, and the next. The effort of dragging myself took over everything. Every move needed all my attention, a pattern of pain that was all I knew now. Dig the elbows in, pull forward a few inches, rest, repeat. The forest floor scraped my skin through my jacket sleeves, but that hurt way less than the pain shooting from my broken legs. Blood soaked through my pants, leaving dark smears on the ground behind me. I couldn't feel my feet anymore. One small break and all this pain. The numbness crept up my legs, mixing with sharp bursts of pain whenever my legs hit rocks or roots. My watch said 3:15 p.m. I'd been crawling for less than 40 minutes, but in that time I'd covered maybe 50 yards. At this rate, I wouldn't reach the trailhead until sometime tomorrow. The temperature would drop into the 30s tonight. People died of exposure in warmer conditions than that. I couldn't stop. Keep going, I told myself, my voice a cracked whisper in the silent forest. I didn't hear any birds or animals. That thing had scared everything away. Even though it was gone for now, the woods stayed quiet. The next white diamond marker on a tree looked so far away. I stared at it and pushed myself forward, inch by inch. My backpack dragged behind me while still attached to me. It made moving harder, but I needed my supplies. I lost track of time. All I knew was how far I'd moved and how much it hurt. Getting to each trail marker felt like winning a small battle, but reminded me I had a long way to go. My hands and arms got scraped up from crawling on the ground. The November afternoon got dark faster than I thought it would. My watch said 4:30 p.m. when the woods started getting dark. The sun wasn't completely down yet, but under all these trees it got dark early and really dark. I stopped to drink some water, struggling to get the bottle from my pack. My hands shook bad. From being tired, losing blood, or the cold, I couldn't tell. Probably all of it. As it got darker, I started to worry. What if I couldn't make it back before night? What if that thing came back? What if Elena, waiting for me to come home for dinner, called for help? Who wouldn't get here until tomorrow morning at the earliest? I tried not to think about that stuff. I had to focus on what was right in front of me. The next marker, the next yard, the next inch. It got dark really fast. I turned on my flashlight and held it in my teeth while I crawled, the light bouncing around as I moved. The white diamonds caught the light, making them easier to see in the complete darkness. I got colder as the temperature dropped. I started shivering so bad it made crawling harder. I stopped long enough to pull out the emergency space blanket from my pack, wrapping it around my shoulders and tucking it around me as best I could. It made crinkling noises every time I moved, sounding extra loud in the quiet forest. Once it was completely dark, the woods looked different. Trees were just black shapes. Every dark spot seemed dangerous. My flashlight only lit up a small area in front of me, making everything else seem even darker. 2 more markers, I promised myself after checking my GPS. Then rest. I kept moving, the space blanket dragging behind me. The ground got harder, colder. Frost started forming on fallen leaves. My breath came out in visible puffs that caught the flashlight beam. Time dragged on. My GPS showed I'd covered less than a mile in 4 hours of crawling. The trailhead was still over a mile away. At my current pace, I wouldn't reach it until well after midnight if I could keep moving that long. The pain in my legs was so bad I couldn't even describe it anymore. It hurt so much it felt like the pain was its own thing, following me and screaming for attention every time I moved. Around 9 p.m., I reached a relatively flat section of trail. I allowed myself 10 minutes of rest, using the time to eat a protein bar and drink more water. I needed calories to keep moving, to maintain what little body heat I still generated. When I started again, my arms shook with fatigue. How much longer could I force them to drag my weight forward? How much blood had I lost? These questions kept popping up in my head, but I couldn't focus on them. The temperature continued to drop. My hands lost dexterity, and I had to periodically tuck them under my armpits to restore enough feeling to continue. The flashlight beam weakened as batteries drained. I had spares in my pack, but lacked the coordination to change them with my numbed fingers. Midnight approached. The forest looked weird in the darkness, just black and silver shapes in the moonlight coming through bare branches. I could only focus on the few feet of ground ahead of me, lit up by my dying flashlight. The trail widened almost imperceptibly. My GPS confirmed what I barely dared hope. I was approaching the final quarter mile to the trailhead. The news gave me a second wind, pushing me forward despite how much my body hurt. When I finally saw the wooden trailhead sign in my flashlight beam, tears filled my eyes. The parking area lay just beyond. My truck waited there. The last 100 yards took nearly an hour. I crawled across gravel that tore at my hands and elbows, each piece feeling like broken glass against my raw skin. The truck looked exactly as I'd left it, weirdly normal after everything that had happened. I reached the driver's side door and pulled myself up to reach the handle, nearly passing out from the effort. The door swung open. Getting inside became another brutal challenge. Lifting my ruined legs high enough to clear the door frame generated pain that left me gasping for air, spots dancing across my vision. Somehow I managed it. I pulled my body onto the seat, legs dragging behind. The effort left me panting, drenched in cold sweat. I slammed the door shut and locked it, an automatic gesture that seemed absurdly inadequate against the thing in the forest. The keys were still in my jacket pocket. My fingers felt like wooden sticks as I fumbled them into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and heat began pouring from the vents. I sat there for several minutes, shaking violently as warmth slowly crept into my frozen body. I needed a hospital. The nearest town of any size would be Marquette, about an hour's drive. I put the truck in gear and turned on the headlights, illuminating the empty Forest Service road ahead. Driving with unusable legs presented its own challenges. I had to operate the pedals using only my right hand, reaching down to press the gas while steering with my left. At any other time, it would have been impossible, but adrenaline and survival instinct made the impossible necessary. The forest road stretched before me, rutted and narrow. Each bump sent fresh waves of agony through my legs. but I kept going. The 20 miles to the highway took over an hour, my speed rarely exceeding 15 miles per hour in the darkness. When I finally reached the highway, the dashboard clock showed 2:13 a.m. Marquette lay another 30 miles ahead. There was no traffic at this hour, the road empty in both directions. I pushed the truck faster, my hand cramping from holding down the gas pedal. The road blurred before my eyes. I caught myself nodding off twice, jerking awake as the truck drifted toward the shoulder. Blood loss, exhaustion, and injury were taking their toll. I rolled down the window, letting the cold air wake me up. Lights appeared ahead. Civilization. A gas station sat on the outskirts of Marquette, its bright lights visible in the darkness. I pulled into the parking lot, aiming for the spot directly in front of the entrance where the night attendant would see me. My strength had reached its limit. I couldn't get out of the truck. Instead, I leaned on the horn, the sound breaking through the quiet night. I pressed it again and again, holding it down for long intervals until lights came on inside the station and a figure appeared at the door. Before the attendant reached my truck, darkness closed in from all sides. My last conscious thought was relief. Someone had found me, someone would help. I woke to bright lights and the antiseptic smell of a hospital room. Machines beeped steadily nearby. An IV line ran into my arm and both legs were elevated in casts that extended from ankles to mid-thighs. "He's awake," someone said. Elena's face appeared above me, eyes red-rimmed from crying, her dark hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. "James," she whispered, taking my hand, "you're okay." "You're at Marquette Regional Hospital." A doctor joined her, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a clipboard. "Mr. Anderson, I'm Dr. Reynolds. You're stable now, but you've got multiple fractures in both legs, severe blood loss, early hypothermia, and a concussion. Can you tell me what happened to you?" I swallowed, my throat dry as sandpaper. Elena held a cup of water with a straw to my lips, and I took a small sip before speaking. "I was hiking," I began, the words coming slowly. "Something attacked me on the trail." "What kind of animal was it?" the doctor asked. Pen poised over his clipboard. I looked at him directly. "It wasn't an animal, not like anything I've ever seen." I described the creature in detail. Its impossible height. The pallid skin stretched over its skeletal frame, those hollow eyes that absorbed light, the mouth with too many teeth. As I spoke, I watched the doctor's expression change from professional concern to polite skepticism. He exchanged a glance with a nurse standing nearby that I recognized immediately. The look medical professionals give when they think a patient is confused or hallucinating. "You took quite a blow to the head, Doctor," Reynolds said gently. "Concussions can cause temporary confusion, even hallucinations. The human mind tries to make sense of trauma by creating narratives. I know what I saw. I insisted, my voice stronger. I shot it twice at point-blank range. The bullets did nothing." Another look passed between the doctor and nurse. "The police are here, Doctor," Reynolds said, changing the subject. "They'd like to ask you some questions when you're up to it. 2 officers interviewed me an hour later. I told them everything, exactly as it happened." They nodded politely, taking notes, but their questions revealed their true thinking. "Any chance it could have been a bear?" the older officer asked. Maybe the shock of the encounter made it seem larger, more threatening. "Bears don't stand 8 feet tall. Bears don't have skin like plastic wrap over bone. Bears don't ignore bullets," I said flatly. "Well, no reports of bear activity in that area," the younger officer admitted, "but sometimes a territorial male can wander pretty far. Could explain the aggressive behavior. They left with promises to investigate the trail where I'd been attacked. I knew they wouldn't find anything. No blood trail from my crawl, no bullet casings, no evidence of the creature. It would be categorized as an animal attack, maybe with a note about possible hallucinations due to trauma and blood loss. Elena stayed by my side through it all, holding my hand, bringing me water, helping adjust my position when the pain became too much. But I saw the doubt in her eyes too, careful, loving doubt that didn't want to challenge my experience directly, but couldn't accept it either. "You don't believe me?" I said quietly after the police left. She squeezed my hand. "I believe something attacked you. I believe you experienced something traumatic, but not what you described." Elena hesitated. "James, you lost a lot of blood, you had a concussion, your body temperature was dangerously low when they brought you in. Any of those things could affect perception." I didn't argue. What was the point? I couldn't prove what I'd seen. The creature had made sure of that, attacking me in a remote location, leaving injuries that any wild animal might cause. Perfect deniability. The doctors kept me for 3 days. The official diagnosis listed multiple compound fractures to both tibias and fibulas, severe lacerations, mild hypothermia, and concussion. The attack was attributed to possible large predator, species undetermined. As I lay in the hospital bed, watching sunlight cross the wall and listening to the steady beep of monitors, one thing became absolutely clear to me. The forests and wilderness I'd loved my entire life now represented something entirely different. Not peace or escape or connection with nature, but threat, danger, the unknown. I would heal eventually. The orthopedic surgeon said I might walk normally again with extensive physical therapy, though my hiking days were likely over. That suited me fine. I never wanted to set foot on a forest trail again. I knew with complete certainty what I had seen was real. Not a bear, not a hallucination. Something that shouldn't exist had hunted me for sport, had toyed with me before attacking, had left me alive when it could easily have killed me. The wilderness had revealed its true face to me, and I would never forget it.